Hello and welcome to Arsenal Analysed. I'm JC. I hope everyone is doing well. Today I bring you an extra special episode of Arsenal Transfer News as I'm joined by none other than Arsenal correspondent at goal.com, Charles Watts. How are we doing today, my friend?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm very, very well. And firstly, I just want to say a huge thank you for coming on during a time of the season, which I imagine is very busy for you.
No problem. No problem. Always happy to talk on these sort of shows.
Brilliant. Well, look, I'm conscious that you've probably got a million and one other things to be getting on with. So we'll pretty much just dive straight into things, I suppose. And the first question, or the first few questions actually that I wanted to ask was away from transfers. And I'm sure a lot of Arsenal fans who do eventually watch this will want to know about it. But just wanted to learn a little bit more about you. And my first question comes from a little bit of inspiration from another channel that I regularly watch, Albert J TV, and his life story series. And I just wanted to know where your kind of love for football and Arsenal sort of really started, your sort of first memory, how it all began, really.
Oh, God, taking me back. Well, my dad was born in Holloway and lived on Hornsey Road, basically in the shadow of the Emirates now. So he's a proper Arsenal boy, and he grew up in the sort of 40s, 50s at Highbury, watching Jack Kelsey and people like that. And I've got two older brothers, and neither of them actually follow Arsenal, so I wouldn't say he pressured me into it or anything like that, because they didn't get into it. One's a Liverpool fan, one's a Charlton fan. But then, I was sort of growing up. I had two older brothers, and I could have gone down either of those routes, really. Sometimes you follow your brothers, don't you? But Arsenal was just always kind of there for me. Charlie Nicholas was playing at that sort of time. He had the same name as me, and I think that was a big thing as well. And my love for it just sort of grew from there. Dad took me to my first game was 88, in the 88, basically the Michael Thomas season. That was my first season I started going. I think the first game was in December or January. It was Sheffield Wednesday at Highbury. Drew 1-0, Paul Merson scored. I mean, from that moment, I was hooked. I was a fan before that anyway. I remember one of my earliest memories is I kind of just about remember the Charlie Nicholas final at Wembley when Arsenal beat Liverpool 2-1 in the Littlewoods Cup. I think it was called the Littlewoods Cup then. And then the following year, I absolutely remember the Luton final where Arsenal lost last-minute goal.
Yeah.
And I remember I didn't go. My dad went, but he didn't take me to that. And I was watching it at home, and I was crying my eyes out. We lost in the last minute. And I remember my mum sent me to my bedroom because I wouldn't stop crying, and I was getting really angry. So it all sort of started from there. So it basically started with a little bit of pain with the Luton game, and then Anfield 89 happened, and I was a season ticket holder from 1990 onwards, and it's just I've just never been away. It's just always been deep rooted in me, and we'll never go. And at the moment, I'm in the process of trying to make sure it's deep rooted into my son as well.
Oh, nice, brilliant. I'm in the same process with my kids, and unfortunately, they have no interest in football whatsoever. So
yeah, my daughter's like that. But my son, he loves playing it. He still won't sit down and watch a game or anything like that. He's far too bored, and he'd leg it off everywhere, which is why I haven't taken him to the Emirates yet. I was thinking about taking him to the Sevilla game in the Emirates Cup, but I'm actually going on holiday the day that we play that game, so I can't. But I was thinking of trying to get him in that one. I'm definitely going to do it soon, but I know keeping him sat down on a seat for 90 minutes is not going to be easy.
No, it certainly won't be, unless it's an exciting game. You might be in with a little bit of luck. But another thing that I was quite interested in, I've sort of had a little look at your career. I know you started back at a more sort of local outlet, if you will, in Reading before moving to Football.London and now Goal. But I just wondered how you kind of got into sort of journalism, your sort of journey, and more specifically how you were, I suppose, lucky enough to kind of fall into that sort of category of reporting on Arsenal.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is my 20th year now as a professional journalist. I suppose I started pretty much exactly 20 years ago last month, and on the local paper around here, which was the Windsor and Slough Express. I started as a junior news reporter. When I finished school, even in school, I remember it was in 1998. It was like my second to last year at school, and I wrote in the school magazine. We did like the review of the World Cup 1998, France World Cup, and I wrote that. So I was always kind of into it. As I was getting to the end of school, it was all about sort of football writing for me. And I hated school. I wasn't good at school. I was rubbish. And so I left after my A levels, went around the world for a year, and then came back and I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And it was always, I think basically once I realised I wasn't good enough to play football professionally, it was like, what's the next best thing is to get paid to write about it. And so I spoke to a few people who I knew who were already in the industry, some of my brother's friends, and I went to a journalism sort of course that lasted about 5 months in London, did that. Okay. And after that, I got my first job as a junior news reporter in Windsor Slough Express, spent a couple of years there, and then sort of had to do exams and all that sort of stuff, became a senior journalist, carried on doing news for about 4 years. And then 2006, I think it was, I moved over to Reading, got my first job on a sports paper there, one of the local ones around here, kind of doing non-league and a little bit of Reading FC, but non-league was my main bit there. And then kind of moved around a couple of local papers, ended up going back to the Reading Evening Post, which was the evening paper, the big evening paper there. Right. And that was my first job as a proper out and out correspondent of a football club, as a big professional football club. Spent some really good years at Reading, loved it. It was a really interesting club. It was a mess. It still is a mess, to be honest, but gave me some really good, interesting stories to write about, big stories to write about. And I was really enjoying it there. But that paper was part of what used to be called Trinity Mirror, which is the largest regional publishing group in the country. And they launched Football London, which was basically going to be a big football website, kind of run like a regional newspaper or a regional online desk, but in London. And they launched it, and they kind of took me away from Reading Evening Post there and asked, "Do you want to do this?" A guy who was basically running it he knew I was an Arsenal fan. He's like, "Do you want to do this?" And my first day of my first journalism course back in 2001, you had to stand up and say to the other people, "What's your ambition in this?" And mine was to get paid to watch Arsenal. And so, when that opportunity came up, I wasn't going to say no. And so I moved to Football London, and it all went on from there. So it's been a long journey. 20 years ago it started, and it's taken. There was lots of times where I thought about chucking it in, and sitting in parish council meetings around here, listening to people argue about where they're putting a fence post in a garden and things like that. Just thinking, what am I doing? Am I really ever going to get into sport? Yeah. But stuck it out, and it all paid off in the end. So yeah, it's been a long journey, but ups and downs. But obviously, very happy with it now.
Oh, I can imagine. Obviously, you've got a great career at Goal. You've got your own YouTube channel, and that's one of the things that I really like about your channel and about your writing is that there are a lot of journalists out there who seem to they want to write about every story, whether it's true, whether it's a rumor. They want to be the first, always want to be the first. And, you always seem to deal in facts, which I love, which kind of brings me on to my next question, actually. And I told a few friends that we were going to be doing this interview. And one of my friends, Keith from Mostly Arsenal, he gave me an idea around a question to ask, which was, I'm sure during your career, you've had to maybe take a bit of a risk on a rumor or a story when it comes to Arsenal. And I just wondered, if there was a big risk that you've ever taken on something where you weren't necessarily 100% sure, but you thought, I'll take a bit of a punt on this one.
No, to be honest, I'd never take a punt on it.
Yeah.
It's too risky, and it just comes back to bite you if you did that. That's not what, all the years of training has taught you, is that you just don't, unless you're sure, unless you're 100% convinced in your sources, then don't do it. You got to, you just don't. And so, no, I've never say I've taken a punt. I think the most nervous I've been doing a story,
right,
putting something out, even though I was 100% sure of it, because it's different in football. You can be 100% sure of something, write the story, but then 6 weeks or 4 weeks later, it's changed, and it's not because the story wasn't right at the time you're doing it. It's because and we're talking specifically about transfers here because that's
exactly
the main thing. And in terms of things can change, it's like doing anything. I mean, you're talking about multi-million-pound deals, and when you're writing a story and saying, so and so is going to go here, it can change literally like that. I'll tell you. I mean, not a big transfer, but Daniel Ballard, for example, the other day, before he ended up at Sunderland, it was literally done with Burnley. Everything was agreed. Clubs had agreed. Everything was there. He'd gone up there. He'd had his medical, and then at the very last minute, it just fell through. And anything can change. And so, when you write stories, it can always come out. People, especially with social media, people can use it against you. Like if it doesn't happen, and people will dig out old tweets and old stories and say, "Oh, what about this? You got it wrong. Bad sources, or you made it up." It's like it's utter rubbish. It's just things change. It's like if you're buying a house, you can get right to the end of that deal and then suddenly it collapses and you don't buy the house, even though you thought it was all done and dusted. And it's the same with transfer deals. So I remember when I broke the Thomas Partey story on deadline day when he signed, and I knew you just knew when you're about to press send, you know that it's going to send Twitter into an absolute, especially on transfer deadline day. It's just, and if it doesn't happen, if the deal for one reason or other doesn't happen, people are going to come back and it's going to bite you, and you're going to get so much abuse constantly for days afterwards because of it. And so I remember when I was about to press tweet, and I just knew. I knew what it was going to do to social media. I knew how excited everyone was going to get. It was going to absolutely explode. And I just remember sort of taking a deep breath and pressing a tweet. And thankfully, it all worked out fine. The deal was done, and it was great. And it was a really exciting moment on terms of Arsenal's social media. But you do get nervous when you're going to break a story, because you just know that the way. And it always comes back to social media. It's just the way it does. If it doesn't happen for one reason or other, it's your fault, even though it's not. It's nothing to do with you. And when you wrote the story, it was perfectly legit. It was fine. It was based on proper information that you'd sourced 2, 3, 4 different sources before you actually, sent it or did the story. But it always comes back to be your fault if it doesn't work out. So it's just something you've got to deal with in modern journalism, to be honest, because social media. It's got its perks. I like it, but at times, but other times it's so toxic and horrible, and it just drains you completely.
Unfortunately, social media can be a very dark place at times. And I've seen, like you said, people get absolutely ridiculed for their stories that they break if things don't work out. And like you say, they don't always work out, unfortunately. And I suppose it's a good segue into finally talking about some transfers, which is, I assume, one of the main reasons why a lot of people might watch today's video. And from my point of view, at least, it looks like Arsenal are trying to target sort of 3 areas, a defender, maybe a fullback, for example, a central midfield player, and a sort of like right winger / sort of right forward. I've seen over the last sort of couple of days that Lisandro Martinez possibly, most likely won't happen now. I just wanted to grab your thoughts on what the situation with Arsenal is in this particular area. Are you aware of any names, anything going on?
Well, I mean, Martinez was obviously their main target in that position, and it's one that they've not managed to get through. I mean, it hasn't been done yet with Manchester United at the time of recording this, but it's very close now to being done. And there was always kind of a feeling whenever I spoke to people about this, that the Ten Hag connection was probably going to mean he was going to end up there. I mean, you look at the price United have eventually gone for him anyway. I don't think Arsenal were gonna go near that anyway. So I'm not sure they'd even got to the point of being able to talk to him, because Ajax just weren't gonna. If there was the money they were demanding, I'm not sure Arsenal would have gone there. So it'll be. I mean, I can't say where they're going to go now, because I don't know. I know there's lots of stuff about Grimaldo at Benfica, and I was speaking to someone over there about it, and the details I've got are quite sketchy about it. I know there's been talks that they've actually made a bid and stuff like that. I haven't heard that myself. I've heard that there has been sort of discussions about him potentially, and he's not going to cost too much money, and they've obviously got Kieran Tierney there as well. And if which is the big if Kieran Tierney stays fit, then I'm not sure anyone comes in ahead of him anyway, which the whole Martinez thing I always thought was a little bit odd, spending that sort of money potentially on someone who's not guaranteed starter. But, I suppose you've got to improve your squad, but it always felt a little bit odd to me. So it remains to be seen what they do if they go for the sort of cheap backup option like Grimaldo. Personally, I'm not sure they should. And that's just me talking as a fan almost, that, if people I've spoken to about him I don't get the impression that he's that good. And I just think, well, you've already got Tavares, who, I know he's not had the best of first seasons, but he did show flashes of that he was he could be all right. He's younger. He's something to work with, and I'm not sure replacing him with someone sort of 6-7 years older who again isn't great. That what's the point? But remains to be seen. So yeah, it's a little bit up in the air. Unfortunately, I can't give you too much on who's going to be the main target after Martinez, because it's just not one that I've really heard of, and nothing's really come out yet. And Arsenal keeping things very close to their chest this summer. There's no doubt about it. You look back to the Fabio Vieira deal, and that was totally out of the blue. Like, none of us had any sort of inkling. It's very, very rare that a story, a deal like that happens without anyone in the sort of main Arsenal pack, or even over in Portugal as well, really had any inkling about it. It was just suddenly bang. I remember that day that he signed. I went to play golf. It was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I was like, I'm done for the day. I was going to go and play golf, and I left my house. Nothing was happening. I got to the golf course, looked at my phone. I was like, that's funny. Oh my god, who? And caught us all by complete surprise. And I was walking around the sort of first tee of the golf course, like ringing people in Portugal, people at Arsenal, trying to find out exactly what was going on. It was just, in years, really, I've not seen a deal like that happen. And it's kind of the way Arsenal are working this summer, and it's interesting.
Well, that was before we get into midfield. I suppose now's probably a good time to ask the question. As a journalist as well, Arsenal with this new kind of transfer strategy, and I've seen articles pop up online saying that Edu prefers to work silently. What do you make of this new strategy, and how difficult does it make your job when Arsenal operate like this?
Well, it makes it difficult, obviously, but I don't think Arsenal care about that.
No,
it's not. And to be honest, yeah, I mean, Edu is not one to talk or even off the record or anything like that. He likes he likes to operate the way he does, and to be honest, it's kind of been like that before at Arsenal. It's never so much comes from the top of the club when you get with journalists and stories. A lot of it comes from agents and stuff. It's not so much always. It's not really the clubs. There's this sort of belief that football clubs, brief everyone and tell exactly what's going on, and it's not really the case at all. It's a lot more of the info comes from people within the game and different agents and things like that. It's very rare that you get clubs really sort of briefing on transfer targets, because they want to do everything under the radar. They don't want anyone else to get wind of it and suddenly come in and get a player ahead of them. So it's just the kind of way they operate. They always operate. And it seems to be I often see it, and that people say, people are on the Arsenal payroll, journalists are on the Arsenal payroll. It's a PR. It's like, it makes me laugh, because I think it's just so completely wrong, and yet people manage to convince themselves that they're right. And this is what actually happens behind the scenes. It's just like, I wish, I wish Eddie was texting me all the time, telling me exactly what was going on. Make my job a hell of a lot easier, but it's just really not. It's not the case.
Brilliant. And midfield is another big area that Arsenal are rumoured to be potentially signing someone in, and a few names recently. Tielemans, which has gone on for what feels like forever. Lucas Paqueta is another one that's come up recently, and Milinković-Savić. So any updates on any of those guys, or even any names that we're not aware of?
Savić, it's not one that I've seen people talk about it, but for me it feels a lot more like a sort of social media link type thing. I've never heard anyone mention him to me in my conversations with people. Paqueta's an interesting one. I think there's definitely interest there in him, and there's been no bid for him as far as I'm aware, but there's definite interest in him if potentially a deal can be done. Lyon notoriously difficult to deal with, but I think the difference with this summer anyway is that they've kind of come to an agreement that he can go, and they might not completely price him out of a move, which Lyon sometimes do. So I think that's one to keep an eye on potentially. I mean, he's Brazilian, which certainly this summer seems to be helping when it comes to actually getting deals done for Arsenal. Eddie's certainly talking to his mate, using his mates. And he kind of fits that role. I mean, a lot of people have sort of looked at him and said, he's number 10. Do Arsenal really need him with Odegaard and Vieira coming in? But I think when you look at Paqueta and he can play in that sort of number 8 midfield role, he kind of fits it very well. He's left-sided, left-footed. And that's a position that Arsenal are looking to improve on this summer. Tielemans is another one. The Tielemans one is interesting. I think I first wrote a story about Tielemans in January, saying Arsenal had been talking with his agent and
Right.
were planning it for the summer. But it's just, the fact that they still haven't pressed the button on it and got it over the line, even though he's available, they've done an awful lot of that, work on it behind the scenes, and they still haven't done it. It kind of makes me feel like they're not 100% convinced, because if they were, they would have got it wrapped up and done and dusted by now, because they want players in early. They wanted him to go over tour like Jesus has done, and they had the opportunity to do that with Tielemans, and they still haven't done it. So personally for me, I wouldn't rule it out, but I've read stories on it recently that their interest has cooled, but it is something they could revisit at the end of the window if they really want to. So I wouldn't totally say no on Tielemans, but it's one that may be on a little bit of a back burner, and certainly someone like Paqueta might be ahead in that pecking order. And people close to him, the player, and potentially around that deal, do think that Arsenal will make a bid. They are expecting one. It's just a case of when it comes and if it's anywhere near what Leon would be willing to accept. So I think that's one that's certainly got legs, but it's far from a done deal or anything like that now.
Okay, well, definitely one to keep an eye on then. And I suppose finally, with regards to ins, right wing / right forward seems to have gone a little bit quiet after the Raphinha deal didn't happen. And I just wondered whether or not, are Arsenal going to gamble on someone, or are Arsenal going to sort of keep what they've got? What's the situation there?
Yeah, again, I can't really bring too much on that because I haven't heard any names. I mean, Raphinha was the guy they wanted. Yeah, they tried, but it was a losing battle from the start, to be honest. I think the sort of feeling around English clubs, because Chelsea obviously went as well, but was that they were hoping Barcelona wouldn't be able to find the money, because everyone knew it was no secret that if Barcelona could agree a fee with Leeds, then that's where he was going to go, because it had been agreed, personal terms, everything, way long ago. I mean, Jesse Marsh was talking yesterday. I saw the press conference, and he admitted that if Leeds had gone down last season, then a cut price deal was already agreed with Barcelona and Raphinha, and it was his dream to go there. So the English club's hopes was that Barcelona wouldn't be able to find the money because of the financial difficulties they have. But somehow Barca always managed to find the money, even though they have none of it. And I saw a story the other day, or a tweet or something, and it's bang on. It's like, it's been about a year or whatever it was since they let Lionel Messi go because they didn't have any money, and they've spent 150 million since then. So they always managed to find the money, and they managed to get Raphinha. So that was it, done and dusted. I think Arsenal were going to be blown out of the water by Chelsea anyway, because Chelsea came in and put a very good bid on the table for him, and kind of is an interesting one. I mean, I was really up for that signing. I thought it would have been great.
Same.
And I thought it would have given, adding Jesus and Raphinha to that attack, along with, Odegaard, Saka, Martinelli, Smith Rowe, Vieira. It just suddenly looked very, very exciting. It looked like there was goals from all the areas there. And, Raphinha was a proper one-on-one winger, take a guy on. And it just felt like a really exciting one for me. But having said all that, it's like, where was he going to play, or what was he going to do? Because it's Saka's position. He's not going to take over. He's not going to play ahead of Saka. So it would have been interesting if they'd have got Raphinha to see exactly what Mikel was going to do with it. But it was disappointing in a way that they didn't get him. And it'll be really interesting to see what they do now, because I haven't heard any names. I don't think anyone else has heard any names yet in terms of what I've seen people linking Serge Gnabry. But again, that's just, for me, always felt like a social media link, one that fans would be more excited about than have any sort of substance to it. Certainly for now. So I'm not sure what they're going to do, unfortunately, but you would think that if they were willing to put down the sort of money they were for Raphinha, which they clearly were because they bid, and made an official offer, then they're going to have a number 2 target, a number 3 target, and they've still got money to play with to bring someone in. Because I do feel that is the one position. Yes, Nicolas Pepe's there, but Arsenal will be trying to move Nicolas Pepe out. There's not again, it's no secret. It's they want to get him out. They're not going to give him a new contract. He's got 2 years left on his deal, so this is the summer to try and get him out if they can. They probably will, but personally for me, I still think it's going to end up being one of those loans. We're hoping for a purchase at the end of it. They're a bit screwed with a Pepe situation, unfortunately, because of his wages and how much money they invested. So I think Pepe will go, and so I definitely think that's the one area of the attack they need to. They can't flog Saka into the ground again, play him in 50 games next season. They need decent backup for him. So you can see why they did go for Raphinha in that regard. And it's just what you want. You want top quality players in each position. You don't want there to be a massive drop off. If Saka can't play, you don't want there to be a massive drop off when you bring in someone to replace him. And if Raphinha was there wouldn't have been. And hopefully, with whoever they do bring in, if they do bring someone in, it's gonna be similar. So I think that will be the sort of story that rumbles on as we get towards the end of the transfer window. Exactly who they're going to bring in on that right hand side of the attack.
Watch this space then, by the sounds of it. And you mentioned Pepe, which is probably a good segue into Arsenal's outgoings. There's quite a few, if rumours are to be believed. Any sort of updates on any of the sort of players? I know Leno's quite close, apparently. I've not really seen too much. Maybe Torreira, I've seen a few stories on him, but apart from those two, I've not really seen too much.
It's all just going to rumble on again towards the end of the window, I think, with all of those. I mean, Leno, absolutely, Arsenal are trying to get a deal done with Fulham but Leno. It makes perfect sense for Leno as well. He loves London. Mrs. loves London. They don't want to move.
Yeah.
Fulham's a great area. It's a great place to live. Or play for, a good club to play for. But Arsenal can't give Leno away. I saw a story just for doing this video, actually. A German journalist had written it, or someone had written it, I can't remember who, saying that Leno was kind of imploring Arsenal to let him go for cheap because of his 4-year service. Okay. But Arsenal can't keep doing that. They need to get decent money for these players. And Bernd Leno's still relatively young for a goalkeeper. He's an international keeper. He's a very good keeper. If you're giving him away, if you're selling him to another Premier League club, which Fulham are, you can't be giving him away. Arsenal have got to start getting some money for these players. It's what they've been notoriously dreadful at for too long now. And I think clubs are almost taking that for granted when they're coming in to try and have talks with Arsenal about getting their players. They're like, well, you've given this player away recently. You've given that player away. We'll take this guy off you, but we're not going to give you any money for him. And they've got to sort that out. And, Leno is a sellable asset. And hopefully they need to get rid of him. They've got 5 goalkeepers on the tour at the moment, which is just stupid. That's another conversation to have. I don't understand that, but they need to get rid of Leno.
I saw your tweet about Charlie Patino.
What's the point of 5 goalkeepers? Not just for Patino or a couple of other youngsters, but just for the 5 keepers. How can you work very well in a training session with 5 goalkeepers? It's like, that can't be good. You surely have like 3 to work with a keeping coach. 5 is just too many. I don't see how it works for anyone. So Leno, Hector Bellerin is still trying to get a move to Betis. I think Hector will go, but it's complicated because of his wages, because there's no money in Spain, and certainly in those in clubs like Betis, they can. Last season he basically took, I think it was getting about 4 million a year at Arsenal. He basically went for $1 million a year at Betis, which you can do for one season if you're him. But to do it for the long term, it's slightly more difficult because I know it's a lot of money, but you still got financial commitments and stuff. So they need to work around and find a solution to that wage issue if he's going to go there. But he absolutely wants to go there. That's his priority. So I do think he'll he'll go. Leno, Torreira, I think will go. But again, it just might. All these things might end up going right to the end of the transfer window. I think it's almost as important with Arsenal in terms of Arsenal's squad to get these players out as it is to get another couple in. Because if you want a happy squad, you don't want, and a settled squad, you don't want unhappy players. And there's just too many in that squad at the moment who aren't going to be getting any minutes next season. So they need to find a way to get them out to ensure that the squad around London Colney during the week is happy and involved. But, if the likes of Torreira, Bellerin, Leno, even Ainsley, Pablo Mari, they're just not going to play. And if they don't move and they're just around the training ground all week, they're not going to be happy, and it's just not going to add to a decent squad. So it's really important that Arsenal find takers for these players. But as always, when you're a Premier League club and a Premier League club like Arsenal, it's difficult to sell anywhere in Europe because of the wages. It's just really it's not easy, and that's why these things tend to run on right until the end of the window, and then they end up going out on loan somewhere because no one will cover the wages fully.
Yeah, well, that's been a problem with some of the previous players at Arsenal, and why a lot of contracts got terminated from what I understand. So hopefully we can avoid that. Only a few more questions. I'm conscious of time. I just wondered whether or not there were any updates on sort of contract renewals. And there's a few players that are sort of coming close to the sort of 2-year mark, but obviously Arsenal keen to keep them.
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to keep them, but there's nothing, as far as I'm aware, close on them. I mean, the big ones are Saka, Martinelli, and Saliba. I know there was lots of rumours going around that Saliba had signed the other day. It's not what I've heard anyway. But Arsenal will be trying to get him done. Just makes sense. You don't want these players to go down into the final year of his contract. I think with Saliba, it's difficult. I think he'll want to see what sort of game time he gets or could get. He also want to see what happens in pre-season. What happens in the first month of the season before the window shuts. Is he playing? Is he getting minutes? I think it's difficult to convince Saliba to sign a new deal right now, given he must have trust issues with Arsenal and how involved he's going to be. So he'll want to see how it pans out a little bit before he signs. So I'd be surprised. It might happen. Look, I might be totally wrong and have egg on my face in a couple of weeks' time, but I think he'll want to see exactly how the sort of lie of the land is before he commits. And the other two, it will take a while, unfortunately, just because of the quality they are. They're in very strong positions. Players are always in strong positions now, and every club in Europe, we banging on Saka's agent's door at the moment, saying, "What's the situation? Imagine. Don't sign a new contract." And it's up to Arsenal to convince him this is the place to be. And I mean, you can only rely on the Hale End emotional tag for so long.
Yep.
And he'll want to be at a club that matches his ambitions. And Saka's very, very good. He could walk into any club in Europe and play, and he'll know that. His agent will know that. So it's up to Arsenal to convince him that he can achieve what he wants to achieve here. So hopefully they'll both sign him and Martinelli. But I don't think at the moment there's going to be an announcement like that. Talks are going to go on for a while, I think.
I'll keep everything crossed until then. So, okay. So only a few more questions. Any sort of Hale End prospects? Obviously, Arsenal have got quite a few that you think might sort of make the step up next season into the first team. Charlie Patino's an obvious one, but any others?
I mean, Patino's definitely the closest. That's why I was really surprised he didn't go on this tour. I just didn't really understand it. But he's the closest. I think we'll see. We should hopefully see a few because of the Europa League group stages and the Carabao Cup. This is first half of the season. Potentially get some minutes. I really like Patino. I thought his cameo last week in Germany was really, really good. And from what I've been told, anyway, the plan isn't for him to go out on loan this season. It's to stay and really sort of progress into the first team picture on a proper basis. So I think there's a good chance we'll see Patino be the next one to really sort of step up. But then I think I really like the look of Flores. I think he's got something about him. He's exciting. His mentality is very, very good. And I know that Mikel likes him and he likes having him around and he's been impressed by him. And I think he's potentially got a chance. I think Hutchinson might end up going out on loan this season. We'll have to wait and see on him. It was definitely a possibility that he's going to go out on loan. I wonder with Flores if he might stick around for the first half of the season. Brooke Norton-Cuffy, I think, looks a very, very exciting talent at right back, and potentially there's a route in for him. He had a really good time on loan last season. I know he doesn't want to just go around playing under 23s football this season, even though he's still really young. If he's not going to get a chance at Arsenal in the first half of the season, he'll go out on loan again and he'll push for that, and his team will push for that because he loved his time out on loan last summer. I think he's clearly got something about him. I think physically the step up to senior football might, it doesn't look like it's going to be that much of an issue with him. And that's maybe what's held Patino back a little bit, is that physically, he needed to improve on that. And I think he has this summer. He certainly looks like he has. But with Brooke, I think he showed last season on loan, he can cope with it. So I think he'll be pretty close as well. So I think they're the main ones for me. But, if you had to say one, it kind of sounds a bit obvious, but I would say probably Patino at this stage.
Yeah, it makes most sense as well. So, okay, so transfers aside, final two questions. Again, just from sort of like a personal point of view, I wondered who your favourite all-time Arsenal player was.
Oh, it's such a hard question, man. It's, I mean, in a way it's not. But then I could just, I'll say Dennis Bergkamp because he is my favourite Arsenal player of all time.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, wait, but Ian Wright was my absolute hero. Like I've never been sort of so besotted with a footballer than Ian Wright. My wall was just covered in Ian Wright pictures and posters. I had every shirt I had growing up was Ian Wright 8 on the back. Every jumper, I was an Ian Wright merch fanboy, and he was. When I was talking to you before we started filming this, when we were in Greece and in the Olympiacos game, Wright was there with Adidas, and we were up walking around the sort of ancient ruins in Greece, and the rumour went around that Wright was up there, and I was with another journalist, and then I just literally legged it off, and I had to get my photo. And it's just what I loved Ian Wright, and I still do. I think he's an absolute legend, and so it's really hard. Bergkamp was just such an artist, and he was there through it all. He arrived, before Arsenal. He stayed the whole time. He retired at Arsenal. He was I've never seen a better footballer, more talented footballer. Everything about him was amazing. But then obviously Henry was. I always say Bergkamp's the best footballer, the greatest footballer I've ever seen, but Henry was the best, which doesn't make any sense, and I know it doesn't. But Bergkamp just epitomised football. The beautiful game, everything he did was just his touch, everything. But then Henry was just this explosive machine that I'd never seen an athlete like him before, and what he could do on the football pitch. And so it's just really hard. I know I've just rambled on for about 3 or 4 minutes. It's so hard to give an answer, but Bergkamp, he was everything. He's everything you want in a footballer. If you see in the dictionary the definition of the beautiful game, it's just Dennis Bergkamp's picture is just right next to it. It's just
he made it look so easy.
I'm just so lucky to have been around seeing. I don't even mention Vieira there, the greatest midfielder I've ever seen by a mile.
He's my favourite.
Tony Adams, the Mr. Arsenal, the best centre back, and there's so many. And David Rocastle, just a hero. Anders Limpar, I cried my eyes out when Arsenal sold him. So there's so many, but you force me down, and I'd say one name, it'd be Dennis Bergkamp.
I'm sure a lot of people would agree as well. It's a question difficult to answer, but and the next and final question, Premier League predictions. I was going to ask you where you thought Arsenal were going to finish. Then I was going to ask you, who you thought the champions were going to be. But I just thought it'd be easier maybe to do kind of like a top 4 or top 6 prediction as things stand, because I appreciate, some clubs will sell players and buy players and it might change. But as things stand, if you were pushed, how do you kind of see things falling in that top 6?
I kind of still feel, as it stands right now, I would probably say the same as how it ended last season. I think, again, we'll have to wait until the end of the transfer window. But I think, I don't know, I kind of feel like Liverpool are in a bit of a stronger position. I think Man City losing Jesus and Sterling in the same summer is such a massive risk. Letting them both go. It's such a huge. I mean, it's like 40 goals out your squad gone. You're relying on Haaland, to hit the ground running, which he probably will because he's a monstrous forward. But you're relying on him to stay fit, and that's Haaland's injury record isn't the greatest. So I think they're taking a really, really big risk there. Yeah, they brought in Alvarez, isn't it, from Argentina? But it's a big ask for him, a teenage guy from South America, coming hitting the ground running as well in the Premier League. It's not always easy. I think if they don't sign anyone else, then it's a big risk, I think. And I kind of feel like Liverpool a little bit stronger in that position, that, even though they've lost Mane. So I wouldn't be surprised maybe if the top 2 flip and Liverpool just edge past City this year. If Haaland can stay fit, I'd say the whole season, I'll say City. But I wouldn't be surprised if Liverpool edge past them. I think Chelsea will still. It's kind of hard with Chelsea because we don't know how their transfer window is going to pan out. They're kind of throwing a lot of darts at the moment. It looks like, Sterling's done. It looks like Koulibaly's going to be done. Then they're going to have to sign another centre-back. And so maybe, I still think Chelsea will probably edge it with third, especially if they get a good striker in.
Yeah.
And I still think, as much as it pains me to say it, that Tottenham are ahead of Arsenal for me, just because of the quality of Kane and Son again, that... you're guaranteeing 50 goals a season there. And Arsenal, I think Jesus is a brilliant signing, but you couldn't guarantee that between them, Arsenal's forwards are going to score 50 goals. And with Tottenham's, you absolutely can if they stay fit. Plus, I think they're going to be much better defensively with a proper full pre-season of Conte and everything as well. So it still feels like Tottenham might have the edge over Arsenal. But if Arsenal can have a good end to the transfer window and potentially bring in another game-changing midfielder to fill that 4-3-3 role where we saw Xhaka kind of filling it in last season, then Arsenal will have a good chance. We'll have a chance. It's going to be close, but it still feels like top 5 for me might end up being the top 5 that we saw last season, and then the 6th is just anyone's guess, to be honest. It's like there's sort of 5-6 clubs you could potentially get. Apologies for the noise you can hear in the background, but my neighbour's having his bathroom done at the moment. And
don't worry about that.
Honestly, it's just drilling non-stop for the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Well, look, no, I'm just really, really grateful that you've spent some time with me today. And I think we planned for this to be about 20 minutes. It's doubled in time. So I'm even more grateful, as I'm sure you've got plenty to be getting on with. And you've got your own YouTube channel. I'm sure most Arsenal fans will be aware of that. So for anyone watching, go and check out Charles's channel, subscribe to him, follow him on Twitter. Anything to add at all, Charles?
No, not really. I think we've covered pretty much everything, haven't we? So yeah, but just thanks for having me on. Enjoyed it. And always happy to come back again if you need me.
Oh, brilliant. I'm really, really grateful for that. And thank you very much once again for coming on the channel. I really, really do appreciate it. But I think for now, that's going to about wrap things up. So a bye from me. And thank you very much, Charles.
No worries, mate.
Take care, all.